2021 NFL season is getting very close to playoff time, so at this point we kind of have a good idea of what teams do need to select a quarterback come draft time. So I'm going to give my opinions on some of the top quarterbacks I see appearing in the first round of mock drafts at the moment. I'll probably make an updated video about these guys after the combine and their pro days are all done, but for now I'm just going to go off of what I saw from them in the 2021 college football season. So the first guy I'm going to be talking about is a guy that I really didn't like going into the college football season anyway, and he just kind of proved me more and more right as the season went on, and that's Sam Howell. The pros about Sam Howell are that he has good mobility. I don't see anything I dislike in his footwork specifically, and he has good arm strength, so all of that combined is going to add an extra aspect to the offense of whichever team drafts him. But aside from that, there just isn't much that I like about Sam Howell. The main thing that I don't like about Sam Howell is that he struggled in the ACC this year, and that was one of the worst conferences that is a Power 5 conference in college football, and to say that they struggled is an understatement. On top of that, Sam Howell specifically, he needs to lead his receivers better when he passes the ball. You can see here in this clip that he just doesn't put the ball in front of his receivers. And this isn't the only example of this. I see this in a lot of his throws, and I just don't really like it. The next thing for Sam Howell is that he needs to keep his eyes downfield and not be so quick to tuck and run. I have no problem with quarterbacks who can run the ball. I think if you can run the ball as a quarterback, you should do it from time to time, but you also have to keep in mind that you are a quarterback and you are not run first. You should be looking to pass the ball first. I don't like run first quarterbacks in the NFL. Overall for Sam Howell, I think that he's a unique quarterback talent, and because of this, he'll probably be picked higher than he really should be. He struggled in the ACC last year, which is, like I said, one of the worst, if not the worst, Power 5 conference in college football. I think he can lose you games very easily, but that being said, he can also win you a game just as easily. So if the pick pays off and he's good, it's going to really pay off for the team that picks him. But unfortunately, I just don't see Sam Howell as that guy where the pick is going to pay off. And as a Jaguars fan, when I watch him play, I see nothing more than Blake Bortles in both his talent and in his play style. The next guy I'm going to be talking about is someone that I was pretty surprised when I started looking at mock drafts to see be going in the first round of the draft, and was even more surprised to see him as the first quarterback picked in some of the mock drafts, and that's Carson Strong. So the pros for Carson Strong is that he has very good arm strength, probably better than Sam Howell, I would say, and he could also throw decent under pressure. He has good ball placement at most of the time. He deals with bad snaps very efficiently. They happened quite a bit for Nevada for some reason. And he also has good anticipation as a pocket passer. So to sum up Carson Strong's pros, I would say mainly he just looks very comfortable, and he looks like he can deal with the pressure that is going to come with the NFL. But when it comes to the cons for Carson Strong, it's a lot. He lacks any sort of mobility. I compare his mobility somewhat to Ben Roethlisberger in that it seems like he has the mobility of a brick. The only difference being that Ben Roethlisberger is big, so he can deal with hits and stay on his feet, where Carson Strong isn't. When he throws the ball, also, the ball kind of carries, which, I mean, it kind of lacks velocity, travels in the air very slow despite him having the good arm strength, and I think that could be attributed to his next con, which is that he can't throw a tight spiral consistently. I think the ball wobbling in the air might slow it down, and it just makes it easier for a defender to see the ball, react to it, pick it off. The next thing I don't like about Carson Strong, and it's not really anything specifically with him, but this is going to be said about quite a few quarterbacks that I talk about. He didn't play in a Power 5 conference in college. And that's not to say I don't like any quarterback that didn't play in a Power 5 conference. And I'm not saying that if you didn't play in a Power 5 conference, you're going to be a bad quarterback. But when you look at the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, most of them did play in a Power 5 conference. There's a few that didn't. Mainly when I think of them, Zach Wilson played at BYU. Derek Carr played at Fresno State. Derek Carr is the best that didn't play in a Power 5 conference. But then when we look at quarterbacks who we consider to be top 10 quarterbacks or elite talents, all of them played in a Power 5 conference in college football. So I don't, like I said, I don't dislike every quarterback that didn't play at a Power 5 conference, but Carson Strong just isn't going to be that guy that changes that narrative for me about not wanting teams to draft quarterbacks that didn't play at a Power 5 conference so high in the first round, which is exactly why I was shocked to see him as the first quarterback off the board for some of these scouts or analysts. The next thing about Carson Strong that I don't like is that he's a one-dimensional player. He lacks any sort of mobility, like I had said, and quarterbacks that just cannot move at all, I think it takes away from your offense, and it just kind of makes you more predictable. So I'm not a big fan of that. And the last thing I have for him, and this might be nitpicking just a little bit, because I'm not even sure if I'm completely right on this, but when I was watching his film, I noticed that his footwork when he's dropping back specifically seems kind of panicked. It's almost like he's rushing himself to get into the pocket so that he can make his throw. And that's something that kind of just completely goes against what I had said earlier about him seeming like he's calm in the pocket and he's ready to deal with the pressure of the NFL. It just kind of caught me off guard when I was looking at it. Like I said, I don't know if it's anything to be concerned about, but I just thought I'd throw it in there just because it is something that I noticed. Overall, Carson Strong does seem like there is the potential there to be a good quarterback in the NFL. Maybe not a great one, but a good one. But I don't think he's going to be day one ready. Most of his cons are coachable, aside from the fact that he has no mobility. That's never going to change. And for that reason, I think ultimately down the road, he is going to be the piece holding the offense back of whichever team decides to draft him. I compared him kind of to Andy Dalton or Joe Flacco in that they both kind of were limiting their offense. Despite Joe Flacco winning a Super Bowl, it wasn't him. So Carson Strong, going to limit your offense. You might be able to win a Super Bowl if you build everything around him. But I would say, for the most part, if I were an NFL team, I would avoid drafting him. Up next, I'm going to be talking about Malik Willis. Throughout the season, I didn't really get to watch Malik Willis that much because he played at Liberty, and Liberty isn't really a school that's televised that much, so I had to watch Malik Willis a lot through highlight videos. Because of this, my opinion on him might be a little bit skewed because I was mainly seeing highlights, but even still, I like Malik Willis. So to start out, Malik Willis has very good arm strength. It's just as good, maybe even better than Carson Strong and Sam Howell. He has the accuracy on his throws. They just are right where they need to be. He doesn't give up on the play, which is something I said a lot about Patrick Mahomes in his first year starting. I always loved how he would kind of stay on the run, keep his eyes downfield, wouldn't just throw the ball away all the time to avoid losing any sort of yards. So he just knows how to keep the play going. Malik Willis has the mobility. He leads his receivers exceptionally well, which is something I said I didn't like about Sam Howell. Malik Willis does that. And he throws very good under pressure, or even while being hit. You can see it in this clip here. He takes the hit, but he still gets the ball off. I think the cons for Malik Willis are very, very heavily outweighed by the pros. He will put your team at risk of big loss of yards while scrambling sometimes, which is a result of not giving up on the play. And I will admit that for some quarterbacks, it is good to just know when to give up on the play. It seems like right now Malik Willis doesn't know when to give up on the play, but I think down the line in the NFL, that's something that's very, very coachable. He occasionally throws off of one foot, which that's just his throwing motion, and it could end up being a huge issue for him down the line. I don't think it will be, but it's something to look out for. He also didn't play that great of competition in college. Once again, another quarterback who didn't play in a Power 5 conference. There seems to be a lot of them this draft class. I said earlier that I don't think Carson Strong is going to be a guy to break that narrative that I was talking about earlier. Malik Willis seems like he might be the type of guy that would break that narrative, though. And the last thing is that despite not being in a Power 5 conference, they had a 7-5 record this year, which I found to be kind of weird. Now, the difference here between Liberty having a 7-5 record with Malik Willis and in the event that Carson Strong in Nevada had a 7-5 record is that Nevada is in a conference. They are in a conference. They play these low-level schools all the time. Liberty isn't. They're an independent school, so they don't really have in-conference games that they play every year because they aren't in a conference. So they just kind of play teams from all over, SEC, ACC, Big Ten, any of those, and sure, they do play lower level competition than any of those teams that are in the Power 5 conference, but I think they play higher level competition than a team like Nevada. So when it comes to the record, I think it's a little bit more excusable than if a team like Nevada had the same record. Overall, for Malik Willis, I think he displays all the talents of a true dual threat quarterback in the NFL. And if NFL scouts knew how to correctly evaluate dual threat quarterbacks, I think he probably would be the number one ranked quarterback on most draft boards. Unfortunately, they don't. And because of this, I think a guy like Sam Howell, who I think is just less talented in general than Malik Willis, is going to be drafted over him. I couldn't really make a very good pro comparison for Malik Willis. I didn't want to use these guys' names that I did compare him to, because when I say these names, I'm not saying that he is as good as these guys, but his play style is similar to them. I think I see a combination of Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson in the way that he plays. And if he does reach what I think his true potential is, he will be as good as those two. If he doesn't reach his full potential, I think he also has massive bust potential, and I don't think that should steer every team away from drafting him. But I think if you're an NFL team, it definitely is something that you should keep in mind on whether you want to take the safe route or you just want to shoot for the moon. So up next, we have Kenny Pickett. And I'm not going to lie, I thought that I liked Kenny Pickett, but the more that I look back at his film, the more I kind of realize that I don't really like Kenny Pickett that much. And I'm going to get into why exactly that is in just a bit here, but I'm going to start out with talking about the pros. So obviously Kenny Pickett has exceptional mobility, and with that exceptional mobility comes the ability to throw on the run. Unlike Sam Howell, he keeps his eyes downfield when he is on the run, so he's going to take advantage of those like open receivers downfield while he's outside of the pocket scrambling, and he handles the pressure well. When I was watching all of his film, I noticed on multiple occasions that he was in pretty bad pockets, but he was able to keep himself focused and make a fairly decent throw, I guess. But the reasons that I don't like Kenny Pickett is because he struggles with accuracy on a lot of throws. And this was in watching highlight videos. You could see on these throws here, the throws are caught, yes, but it forces his receivers to kind of stop and go back for the ball, and that just isn't going to work in the NFL against NFL defenses. He also, on deep throws, underthrows his receivers a lot, and I'm worried that might be due to lack of arm strength. The next thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way about Kenny Pickett is that sometimes he will just take off and run from a clean pocket, kind of for no reason. And I think to waste a clean pocket like that in the NFL just isn't going to sit right with a lot of coaches. Now, a lot of the cons that I just mentioned are stuff that's kind of coachable, so I think it'll hopefully get fixed when he reaches the next level. But because it's all stuff that has to be coached, I don't like him going to a team right now that is so bad and desperately needs a quarterback, because chances are a team like that is so bad as well because they don't have a good coach. If Kenny Pickett falls to a team that doesn't have a good coach, he's gonna be a bust. And I think the fact that he doesn't control his own success in the NFL is something that, as a team like the Lions or the Washington football team, I would probably avoid, because I'm not super confident in my coaching staff to be able to develop someone who so desperately relies on coaching. Overall, the more I watch Kenny Pickett, the more I just feel that he won't ever be an elite quarterback talent in the NFL like most people think that he will. He has the potential to be a good quarterback, but as a passer right now, I think he has a long way to go. On many occasions, he doesn't lead his receivers very well, underthrows them, and he relies on his receivers and everyone else around him to make the plays for him. If he succeeds, I think it'll just purely be because of the system he ends up in. I said for his pro comparison, at his peak, I think that he'll be Derek Carr, but at his floor, he'll probably end up pretty similar to Mitchell Trubisky. So still an MVP at the end of the day. So up next, I'm going to be talking about Matt Corrall. I do like Matt Corrall actually quite a bit. For the pros, once again, good mobility, which I like in a quarterback. He goes through his progressions very well. You can see specifically on this play, he goes through all of his progressions, and I think he throws it to his third read, which young quarterbacks tend to struggle with this sort of thing. Matt Corrall looks very comfortable in the pocket. He deals with the pressure well, and he has good arm strength, which are three things that I said about Carson Strong. But on top of that, he throws a good spiral, which is something that I couldn't say about Carson Strong. So in my opinion, Matt Corrall has everything that Carson Strong has and more, which is why I, once again, like I said, am so shocked that he was going below Carson Strong in some mock drafts. So for the cons for Matt Corrall, I actually struggled to find some of these. The three that I got were that sometimes his ball lacks velocity, which I said that the same thing about Carson Strong, but I was able to attribute it to the lack of spiral in the ball. Matt Corrall throws a good spiral. So for this, I just cannot tell you why his ball lacks velocity at times, but it isn't as often as Carson Strong. And he also underthrows his receivers occasionally, and he struggles with accuracy sometimes. These were the only three cons that I could find in Matt Corrall's film. So to help myself find more of them, I knew that on TikTok, Theo Ash NFL. I don't know if any of you guys have ever watched his stuff. I think his stuff is great. I love watching it. I knew he made a video about Matt Corrall, and he doesn't like Matt Corrall, and I wanted to see why, see if it's anything that I could agree with. And he essentially said the same thing as me. He said he underthrows his receivers, he struggles with accuracy. The only thing that he said that I don't really agree with is that he kind of runs from clean pockets the same way that Kenny Pickett does. I don't think that he did that often. All of the clips that Theo was using were from the same game against Arkansas. I don't think it's a consistent thing that Matt Corrall does, and it's nothing that he's going to struggle with. But yeah, essentially Theo found the same things that I had said about him. I just think that Theo is a little bit more worried about these things than I am. I think Matt Corral is going to be a good quarterback in the NFL, and I think that these three things are things that he's going to be able to fix when it comes time. Overall, the talent is there, and he has the least amount of cons out of all the quarterbacks that I've looked at up to this point. The cons he does have are mostly coachable once again. Besides the ball lacking velocity, that's something he has to figure out for himself. Like I said, I cannot, for the life of me, figure out why. If Matt Corrall fails in the NFL, I'm going to guess that it's not going to be entirely his fault, but more of the fault of the situation that he's drafted into. My pro comparison for Matt Corrall was Dak Prescott. I saw a lot of similarities in their game, and I've watched a lot of Dak Prescott over the last few years, so if you don't completely understand why I'm comparing him to Dak Prescott, you're just going to have to trust me. Now, finally, the last quarterback I'm going to be talking about is Desmond Ridder out of Cincinnati. I don't completely know how I feel about Desmond Ridder, to be completely honest. So I'm just kind of go over the pros and the cons and see what I can come up with as I talk about him. The pros that I could find for Desmond Ridder is that he has good mobility and he keeps his eyes downfield, which makes him pretty good at throwing on the run. He also looks pretty calm under pressure, and he has good accuracy as well as good velocity on the ball when he throws. The cons are that he played in a non-Power 5 conference. Cincinnati is an independent school, so similar to Liberty, they did play decent competition, but it wasn't the highest level. Now, I guess as a pro, you could argue he was the quarterback of Cincinnati who made the college football playoff as a non-Power 5 team. But the reason I'm not listing that as a pro is because of how bad he struggled versus Alabama in the playoffs. Cincinnati looked like they didn't belong there at all, and Desmond looked like he was completely rattled by Alabama's defense, which in college football is the closest you'll get to a simulation of an NFL defense. Aside from that, the only other thing that I really found, and this may be nitpicking again, is that sometimes he has a weird throwing motion where it takes him a while to get the ball off. And I'm going to show the clip of it here. This doesn't happen often in the clips I found, but when I saw this, I was just a little bit caught off guard. I didn't know what to think about this, and I just thought I would include it just in case. Overall, Desmond is a decent quarterback, I think. I like him more than Howell and Strong, but in most years, I think that he's at most a second-round talent. Obviously, teams needing a quarterback should select him if he's the best available, but I don't think that he's done enough to be super high on draft boards. I didn't have a pro comparison for Desmond because I just couldn't think of anyone to compare him to. I see people saying that this might be the worst quarterback draft class in recent history, and aside from 2013, I honestly might agree with them. There isn't much that I like about many of these quarterbacks. I think I really only like about 2.5 of the ones I just talked about. I'll make another video on these guys after their pro days and after the combine. That one will probably be more about analyzing specifically the pro days and combine, as well as where I think their best fit will be in the NFL. But for now, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you agree and or disagree with, and leave a like if you enjoyed.